There are two things that you can stop obsessing over right now in your photography endeavors, and that is noise reduction and highlight blowouts. Yes, I did say two things, the cardinal things that everyone talks about, noise reduction and highlight blowouts. You can stop obsessing over them right now. Why? Because it's all about the print. So in 2020, when the lockdown started for COVID, I purchased a Canon Pro 100 printer so that I could lock myself in my office and teach myself how to print. Because at the end of the day, what is photography all about? Well, it used to be about having the print in our hands, and I remember that from the darkroom days. So it was really nice to actually dive in real deep and really start to understand digital printing a little bit better. And what I didn't expect to discover during that was that there are two things that I have for the longest time obsessed over, and that was my noise reduction efforts and my highlight blowouts. The first thing I want to talk about is highlight blowouts. Now in this image, this is the digital image right here. Now in this digital image, the only blowout area that we really have is maybe the top of this table and the skylight here that is in the dome of this church. Now that is a very bright white blowout. And I remember during a webinar, someone had asked me how I would treat that. And I told them, you know what? I'm not going to treat it. And the reason why is because of the print. So here is the print. This is a printed copy of it. It might look a little bit different because I tried to photograph a print. So now we take a digital image, we turn it into a print, and then we photograph it. There's going to be things that are lost in translation. But one of the things that I want to talk about here, and the reason why we can stop obsessing over highlight blowouts, especially small ones like this one, is that this takes on paper white. So those highlight blowouts take on the characteristics of the paper that you print them on. So if you take a nice museum rag paper and you print this image on it, you'll have the texture of the paper in that blown out area. So for those of you who don't know what a blowout is, a highlight blowout is anything that has gone beyond the realm of 255. So 255 is pure white. If it's beyond the realm of 255, it's considered clipped or blown out. In general, I do avoid highlight blowouts at whatever cost I can because they are technical flaws. So if an image is littered with highlight blowouts and it looks atrocious because you have these big blotches of white, that's really not an excuse to say, oh, I'm just going to print it on some museum rag paper. You do want to watch those blowouts, but you don't necessarily need to obsess over them. Because if I were to try to fix this area in this digital image, I would get tone compression, and that highlight blowout area would take on some of the gray nature here. In the process of printing, what would happen then? This would actually have a very small thin layer of gray instead of the white that it should be. So obsessing over highlight blowouts is not necessarily the best idea, especially if you're taking on a good quality paper, a nice museum rag paper, it's going to take on the texture. The second thing is noise reduction. And I know that this is a big topic because a lot of people talk about noise reduction. A lot of people talk about their noise reduction methods, the programs and the applications that they use for noise reduction. But I will tell you that the print does not print the noise like you see it in the digital world. And in actuality, sometimes those noisy areas actually come together in the printing process and they aren't even seen as well. Now, this image that we're looking at here, there's a little bit of history that goes into this image. This image was actually photographed in 2015 with a Canon 6D. We're talking about a 20 megapixel image. Now I took that 20 megapixel image and composing this in the dark, I didn't realize what I had actually photographed here with this moon bow and this beautiful moon in the background. And I didn't really have my composition set up correctly because I was using a 14mm lens, which is very wide. So in the process of creating this image, I cropped it. And when I say I cropped it, I significantly cropped it. I cropped off about 40 to 50% of the rest of this image. So effectively, we've now taken a 20 megapixel image and turned it into what? Maybe a 10 to 12 megapixel image. Okay, that's a big, drastic change. And in the process, it was also a night sky image with a camera from 2015. The sensor was probably 2013 era technology. So the Canon 6D isn't known for its high ISO capabilities or its ability to photograph night sky images without producing lots of noise. But I proceeded to process this image anyway because I really liked what I had here. And I'm glad that I did. Now, in this digital image, we clearly do have some noise here. If we zoom in, there is noise in the background here by the sky, but if we go down a little bit further here and we look at the cloud area, look at this noise that's happening here. This is actually more of a technical flaw type of noise. It's almost like a JPEG artifacting type of noise rather than the noise that would have come from the camera in the first place. But I processed it anyway. You can see even more of it over here as well. Now, what I've done here is this is the print. Again, as I said, this is a image that has been printed, and then from the print has been photographed. So there is going to be some things that are lost in translation. In this print, if we zoom in here and we look at this area that I just showed you in the other image, you can see that we don't have a whole lot of actual noise here. Now, if you're physically looking at this print, if you were to pick up this print and look at it from 3 feet away, you wouldn't see any noise at all, period. It wouldn't even be there because of how we look at the image. So if you're sitting here magnified, zoomed into 130% like I am, no one is actually going to look at an image like that in a gallery, in a museum. So we obsess over this noise as if it needs to be obliterated and disappear from our print. And that's not entirely true. Now, what I've done here is I've actually taken the print and put it on top of the digital image so that we could zoom in here and we could see the differences. Here's the print. Here's the digital copy. Now I auto-align the layers, so things are going to be a little bit off. But what I want to show you here is as I zoom into this area here, this, as I said, is the print. This is the digital image. Look at the amount of noise here. Now, should I have obsessed over this noise, this almost JPEG artifacting noise, and blown it to smithereens using some noise reduction program or even Photoshop in order to get that noise to disappear? No, because what happens when you do that? It actually starts to look like a painting. Noise creates detail, okay? So if we obliterate that noise, then we're obliterating our detail. So I don't want you to obsess over this noise reduction because in the final print, we can barely see the noise anyway. Now, there is a difference between the two types of noise that you'll have in the digital photography world, and that is going to be your luminance noise and your color noise. I will tell you, and I will actually stress that color noise be reduced. But your luminance noise, yes, I did do some noise reduction here, both color and luminance noise. I don't think you need to focus as hard on your luminance noise as you probably are right now. And that's because when you print it, it all just kind of blends together because that printer head is going back and forth like this and putting the data that it sees on your screen onto a piece of paper. And in the process of doing that, what's the paper doing? It's absorbing ink. So what happens as that paper absorbs the ink? Well, it does start to kind of bleed a little bit there, maybe not a whole lot, but you don't see the noise like we see it in the digital world. Actually, I remember back in the analog film days when I used to photograph with my Canon AE1, we actually appreciated ISO 1000 film because it would create this beautiful, crisp grain. And we called it grain back then. We actually liked that. We liked the tactile quality that grain had when we had it printed on our final image from the darkroom. But these days in the digital world, it's like, no, that's noise. You know what noise is? Noise is my 4-year-old screaming because he doesn't want to eat dinner. It's been given the name noise, and I get it because of frequency and all this other things that, some scientist came up with in the whole, pixel world of things. But I want you to stop obsessing over that noise, stop obliterating it to smithereens, because you're only doing an injustice to your final printed image when that final printed image isn't even taking on the noise that you're seeing in the digital world. If you want to watch more videos like this, please click on this playlist right here. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. I take things in Photoshop that are seemingly difficult and make them extremely easy so that you can use them in your workflow today. And thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. I do sincerely appreciate it.